We're all constantly trying to make sense of ourselves and the people around us. To do that, we often grab for psychological terms. But what happens when the language from a therapist's office goes viral? When these really complex ideas get boiled down for a social media feed? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. Just think about it for a second. In conversations you have with friends, on social media, even in, meetings at work, we use this language that's borrowed from therapy. We talk about trauma, narcissism, burnout, setting boundaries. This whole vocabulary has just woven itself into our daily lives, and it's made us all kind of amateur psychologists. And that leads us to the big question here. I mean, it's great that we have more language to talk about our inner lives, for sure. But what's the cost? What gets lost in translation when these deep, complicated ideas get squished into a tweet or a 30-second video? All right, let's dive into our first section, psychology's popularity problem. We're going to look at what makes these simple ideas so irresistible and how that very appeal can actually become a trap.
So, what is the appeal of these simple models? Well, they're basically mental shortcuts, right? They're super easy to remember, even easier to repeat and share. They give us this neat, clean language for experiences that are, let's be honest, anything but neat and clean. And in a world that feels so confusing, that feeling of having your bearings, well, that can be incredibly comforting.
And here's the crucial part. These ideas, they don't just stay as concepts we toss around. They actually start to shape how we see the world. A simple model for, say, conflict starts to become the only way we interpret every argument we have. What starts out as just a theory becomes our lived reality. Now, we have to acknowledge this isn't all bad, not at all. Giving people the language for things like anxiety or emotional neglect, that can be incredibly validating. It can stop years of self-blame in its tracks and make people feel truly seen. Making suffering feel less lonely is a huge deal. That really matters. But that brings us to our next section. Because while these easy answers can definitely help, they can also fail us in some pretty profound ways. So let's explore that tension a bit. This quote it gets right to the heart of the issue. Just because an idea is easy to get a hold of doesn't mean it's good enough to explain the sheer complexity of a human life. An idea can be everywhere and at the same time become less and less precise, carrying less and less actual reality with it. This table is a perfect example. I mean, look at how we translate these messy, nuanced human experiences into these sharp, definitive labels. A moment of really intense discomfort? Nope, that's trauma. A person's normal, everyday selfishness? Well, that gets blown up into narcissism. That deep, bone-deep fatigue you feel from being overworked, that's burnout. We're swapping out the complicated reality for a simple but really distorting label.
The thing is, it's not that these labels are always 100% false. The problem is what the source calls reductionistic fluency. It's this ability to talk about the mind in a way that sounds really sophisticated and insightful, but what you've actually done is boiled down a person's entire messy experience to a single, flat data point.
And here's the paradox, the really weird part. This flatness creates a false sense of certainty. When you can just label a difficult coworker as toxic, well, there's no more room for questions, is there? The case feels closed. The simple answer sounds incredibly decisive, even when it's totally wrong. So, this brings us to the real damage of all this distortion. What are the actual consequences when we shrink reality down just to fit it into these tiny, simple models? The source material lays out 3 main ways this goes wrong. First, these models make the human mind seem way more transparent and easy to read than it actually is. Second, our confidence in these labels turns very quickly into moral judgment. And third, the connection between what's going on inside us and what's happening in the world around us, it just disappears. Okay, so let's look at that first point. Human beings are messy. We have mixed motives, our feelings are unstable, we're often a mystery even to ourselves. A flat label like avoidant completely erases that rich, contradictory inner life. It pretends we're simple when we are anything but. And that leads right into the second problem. See, this psychological language rarely stays descriptive for very long. When we call someone a narcissist, we're not just describing a pattern of behavior anymore. We're assigning a role. We're casting them as the villain, pointing the finger, and organizing all of our judgment around that one single label. And third, we completely lose scale. When we treat every problem as something internal, as burnout or dysfunction, we stop looking at the external causes.
I mean, is it really just your personal burnout? Or is it maybe also about economic instability, impossible demands at work, or just general social chaos? When we personalize everything, we lose the ability to think about the bigger picture. This quote just sums it all up, doesn't it? In our super fast-paced social media world, nuance is at a major disadvantage. We want ideas that are portable, emotionally clear, and let us pick a side really, really fast. And in that race for speed, complexity always gets left in the dust. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? This final section is all about how we can start making room for complexity again and develop a better, more serious way to talk about psychology in public. You can see a really clear contrast here. On one side, you have the small psychology of pop culture. It's all about quick labels, false certainty, speed, and judgment. And on the other side, a better psychology emphasizes context. It embraces uncertainty, it requires patience, and it encourages genuine curiosity instead of just snap judgments. So the key word here is modesty. A better public psychology wouldn't get rid of these concepts entirely, but it would be humble about them. It would understand the massive difference between a helpful shortcut, a useful approximation, and a full, genuine explanation for a person's entire life. And this is what that actually looks like. A more serious view of the mind resists those easy answers. It understands that a person can be both harmed and harmful, that someone can be sincere and self-deceiving, all at the same time. It resists turning every painful experience into a person's entire identity. And it always remembers that our suffering often has social or economic or even biological roots. Ultimately, this is the standard we should be using. A psychological idea isn't valuable because it's popular or because it's easy to share or because it makes us feel morally certain. It's only valuable if it is big enough and flexible enough to stay proportionate to the complex reality it's trying to describe. And we'll end on this final, really powerful thought. The real cost of a small psychology isn't just about getting a theory wrong. It's a human cost. It's that we start to believe these narrow explanations about ourselves and about others, and we begin trying to squeeze our large, complex, and contradictory lives into boxes that were never, ever designed to hold them.